In today's video, we're going to be diving into the upcoming pattern. There is a few interesting things going on around the nation, including a major upcoming cooldown that is going to be even more significant than the current one. So even deeper into the fall-like temperatures is where we're headed. There is a couple of areas of tropical interest, including one in the Gulf that could really spark up. We actually have 5 areas of interest listed by the National Hurricane Center, all of which are a relatively low risk of developing. As I've always said, they've always kind of started out in that code yellow range, and they either move up or fizzle out from that point. So we'll have to watch and see. I'm sure that there's a good likelihood that we at least see one of those or 2 of those develop, but we could be in for an active period. It really depends on a lot, but we have a lot of opportunities out there in the tropics, and we also have quite a bit of storms happening around the southern United States especially, but there should be a fair share for just about everyone. Now, before we dive into things, be sure to check out Prestige Weather underneath this video and in the top right corner of your screen. We are doing a September photo competition. The winner will receive $50. So if you have any cool weather photos that you want to share from this month that you've taken yourself, of course, you can feel free to join and list that in there today and have the opportunity to win. We also have the official snowfall forecast, and the winter forecast is coming very, very soon in there. So be sure to check it out today. Anyway, let's dive into things and take a look here at the upcoming pattern. And by this evening, there's a couple of interesting things to note, one of which is this major ridge developing across the western states. So your jet stream is doing something like this, a little bit more mild along the east, but hardly. I mean, it's really in the upper 70s for most areas, unless you're very far south. Lower 70s and even upper 60s up here for the northeast, but we're much cooler here within our trough, and that is headed eastward. We do see a cold front boundary trying to develop along this cooldown, which is fairly typical, of course. Shouldn't be too intense because we don't have the warmest air in the world to the east of this, not the most dynamic system to work with. There is, however, quite a bit of thunderstorms and downpours happening throughout this deeper south area, mostly for the south central and southeastern states. And out of this is where we could see some tropical development in here. And from the models that I'm watching, this is actually the highest chance of developing out of any of the systems. We also do see quite a bit of development off the southeast, but this should stay offshore and develop somewhere out there if it does. So may just be a non-event really for the United States. Although it would get us further in the named storm list, which really we're very, very far behind on. So definitely that could have some implications there, but obviously much of you probably do not care about that whatsoever. Let's go ahead and take this towards tomorrow afternoon on Friday, September 6th, and we do see this cold front is developing into some heavier showers, perhaps some thunderstorms, but again, not the most intense cold front I've ever seen. It is a healthy structure, but there isn't the most humidity and warmth to work with out ahead of it, so we shouldn't be featuring too much activity out ahead of it. It could be intense for some areas, though. We do see to the deeper south this low developing here, and this is that tropical system that I was referring to. We already see this one off the east coast has developed, so we could get 1 or 2 named storms right here before we know it here over the coming days. So definitely an interesting system. We do see that there is a huge ridge still in the west, and this trough is beginning to dig deeper here and move further eastward. So again, cooler air in here, significant cold air compared to normal, bringing kind of late October, early November type temperatures for some folks. Brutally cold at night, honestly, for this time of year. A lot of folks reaching into the 40s, which for this time of year, you know, this portion of September could feel like summer. We have to remember, you know, a lot of times we deal with heat waves this time of year. And right now we're in quite the opposite. So we are 40, 50 degrees cooler than it could be at times. So certainly a big swing from what we've seen in recent years. Now, let's keep going. I want to take us towards Saturday on the 7th. What we see here is this low here off the East Coast. So there is multiple areas of interest here. This one draws a lot closer to the kind of Outer Banks area of North Carolina. Could bring some impacts there, especially if it develops into, let's say, a tropical depression or tropical storm. Should spell heavy rainfall for this eastern South Carolina, eastern North Carolina, and southeastern Virginia corridor regardless. So don't pay too much attention to if it develops or not. This could still be impactful regardless. We do see that there's a low up here in north, kind of eastern Canada. Cold front stretching behind all of this. So this tropical low could try to kind of track along that cold front, or it could head out to sea depending on how much it gets stalled out from this point. We do see some lower pressure in here still for the Gulf. as well as overall storminess kind of hanging out here for the day on Saturday. This trough has now fully moved into the east basically by this point. Massive ridge out west, digging almost directly southward here over the plains, and then doing something like this. So we are dealing with full-blown cooler temperatures throughout all of these areas here. Definitely going to be something that you feel this weekend. As we reach towards Sunday, this is probably going to be the coolest day of them all. This tropical low races out to sea on this model, so it's out of here in a hurry. We still see this low over eastern Canada. We have lower pressure over the Gulf, but nothing's really developed yet on this model. And we do see this kind of a pattern taking place. Very cool throughout some of the Midwest areas into the southern plains, even the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, as well as some of the Southeast here. It should be rather cool compared to normal. And then the West should be much warmer than what is typical for this time of year, as we have kind of this type of a pattern setting up. As we reach towards Monday, it's very similar to Sunday. Don't expect too much different. Very inactive over most of the United States, unless you're in this deeper south corridor where there still is tropical downpours happening throughout all of these areas. As we reach towards Tuesday, it's a lot of the same here. We do see this cool down kind of lifting off. So this is moving out by Tuesday the 10th, which has really been the date that these models have been indicating for a while. Still kind of like this. So we do see a little bit of a mild trough in the east. Should be near normal to below normal still for these parts. Above normal mostly in the central states by this point. And then by Wednesday here, what we're seeing is a trough beginning to try to move down for the northwest here. We can see that it does have some precipitation around with it as well, which is fairly typical. And then a ridge that is primarily over the Rockies into the plains here with a mildly dropping trough here in the east. Again, bringing slightly below normal temperatures, I would say, likely by the 11th here. Thursday the 12th is very similar. We continue to see this trough trying to dig into the northwest, warm up throughout the central states, and this trough is beginning to see its end here in the east. Typically, when we see this cooler air pushing in through the west, this warm up is going to continue to move eastward here. So this is what you can expect to see this model continue to show. Still some storminess within that trough, and also around the Gulf and for some of the plains here in Midwest, we do see some activity there as well. Friday here on the 13th, we're beginning to see a full-blown ridge pattern look favored for the central and eastern states here. Still not fully pushing up the east. We see a lot of activity in here. Likely that's the boundary between the warmth and humidity and then the cooler, drier air. So we're seeing something like this in the east, a real battle of the temperatures. And then really the west isn't putting up much of a fight for this cooler air. Something like that is prevailing with a low over top, which could develop a cold front and begin to trek this cold eastward, especially since we see some slight ridging characteristics to the west. Wouldn't be surprised to see that kind of be favored here in the long range. 14th here, very interesting. We're finally seeing activity around the nation. A little bit of a frontal boundary underneath this Canadian low, which has been the trend here. It's how we've been getting a lot of our activity recently. Still the deeper south and now into the Mid-Atlantic even, we're seeing some activity in that corridor especially. By Sunday, it looks apparent to me that we have a low here, a little mild cold front, and some cooler air coming in behind it. So this could expand, this could look worse over time, and this could spell another cool down for the mid-September timeframe. But I'm not betting on it at this point. We still need to see what this wants to do. This isn't looking the most promising yet, but I could see this trending in that direction, or perhaps away from this. So time will tell, obviously. Some tropical low pressure trying to develop off the southeast again here by the 15th, but this is pretty long range, about 10 days out. So definitely take that with a grain of salt. Now, for all of our tropical lows that we see out there, we do see some development here on your European ensemble model. Some tropical low pressure trying to develop here in this western Gulf of Mexico area and tracking northward towards Louisiana, Texas area. Definitely something that we're watching. Here's that first low that tracks towards Canada, and then the second one closer to the Outer Banks. We see one trying to develop here in the middle of the MDR, which is this area here, the main development region. And then another coming off of Africa. So yeah, there is a few areas to watch for sure. As of now, this is probably, given that we have about 5 or 6 areas of interest, this is definitely looking pretty mild. Things can trend in the wrong direction though, but this is definitely a promising look for how much potential we have out there. This would be almost best case scenario. So definitely not super concerned about this as of now. I will say it is so amazing that we're having this lack of development, lack of activity. The Gulf and Caribbean is at record highs, and it's not even like a close record. It's actually a pretty significant record as far as the most heat potential that we've ever seen in the Gulf of Mexico in recorded history, at least, and the Caribbean. And yet we're seeing these systems struggle. It's truly miraculous what we're seeing. I talked about it yesterday, but I was obviously calling for a very intense hurricane season, if not historic. That has not lived up to expectations. Thankfully, I'm very happy about that. Wish I could be accurate about it, but I'm very glad that it's underperformed because it could have been truly devastating. But if we were to go back, I would see the same data again. Obviously, not knowing what I know actually happens, I would forecast the same thing every single time. There's just no way. The potential in the Atlantic was too much to disregard, and this is truly incredible what we're seeing on a miracle type level, based on the potential that we had. No El Nino. El Nino can kind of hold back hurricane seasons. We didn't have that, and then we had the warmest Atlantic ever. Those two things alone combined would lead you to believe that we would at least see a far above average active season, and we might not even see that. So truly a miracle, to say the least. Here is your European AI model, and we actually do get quite a bit of development from this one. We get low number 1 here off the East Coast developing. Could be tropical, could not, kind of undecided as of now. We see the second one follow it, and then we get some development here in the Gulf. So let's track this really closely. That's 1, 2, and then here's 3 developing in the Western Gulf, hitting Texas, Louisiana as a pretty strong system. So maybe that's the most impactful potential system that we have right now. We'll have to be watching the Gulf as always. Again, the potential is at record highs. It's just, is it going to happen or not? Because thus far this season, things have struggled despite the potential that they have. So we'll have to see if that continues. It doesn't have to. Obviously, we could see things turn around in a hurry. So we're going to take all these threats seriously still, with that disclaimer of how the season has gone so far. Now, there is a couple of areas near Africa and in the main development region that we're tracking, but so far a lot of these waves have just fizzled out this season. Like I said, could still see one come out, so we'll continue to track these with you guys. Total precipitation, a little underwhelming unless you're in this deeper south area where we do see far above average activity. Some of this coming from some tropical interest near Louisiana and Texas. But if you're anywhere north of there, really, you're seeing below average activity. So let's take a look at it. And this is truly shocking. There is some good news here, and I'll discuss it in a second. A little bit of good news. We do see below average activity throughout a lot of Canada, a lot of the United States, and really, again, it's just this Gulf Coast into a little bit of the southeast where we're seeing far above average activity, but doesn't really make up for, let's say, 85-90% of the nation being below average precipitation. The saving grace here is that if you do love fall colors, this dry weather could help things along a little bit, could be a little bit more vibrant in areas where it's typically more dull. I definitely think that this bodes well to the fall colors moving forward, especially since right now is, when those leaves are starting to dry up for a lot of areas. And, we're about a month and a half away from most areas seeing their fall foliage. So definitely through the 20th is a very impactful time. And we could see this type of a pattern continue, which would bode even further good for the kind of fall colors, fall foliage there. Now, we're underneath this cool down right now in the east. Like I said, it's impactful for some areas, pretty intense, especially there in the mid-Atlantic for today. But we do see this next one a lot more impactful. The greens being 10 to 15 degrees below normal, which is what we would consider to be a major cool down. And then we see these blues within the green, which is 15 to 25, which is putting it in a very, very major cool down category. Full-blown Arctic blast, as you can see, moving from the Arctic Circle through Canada and into the eastern states, bringing far below average temperatures. This is going to take us a step even lower than we already are. By the way, I hope you guys have been enjoying these fall temperatures. It's about to take a further dip down as we approach that 10th time frame, and then we start to see the warm air try to trickle in, as you can see. Still, the East Coast is trying to remain cold. It's funny how it does this. Sometimes the East Coast is trying to stay warm and there's colder air around all these areas, and this area just stays warm. Or in this case, the opposite. This cold air just wants to hang out in here, and despite these major warm-ups that are trying to move in, it just really rejects it all the way. Definitely something that is very interesting. And we're kind of left with this by the 20th. I think there is room for a cooldown in there. Let's take a look at the long-range CFS model, which typically, you know, can be a little bit better after the 10-day mark. And we see the 6th through the 11th here, very cool, of course. The 10th through the 15th, a little bit cool, but warming. We kind of get this warm-up phase from the 15th to the 20th. Here's the 20th through the 25th, some cooler air still around for portions of the east, and then the 25th through the 30th, still pretty cool. I think the most significant factor here, though, is that we are seeing this model trend towards cold in the west, which would be a negative PNA, which would start to encourage some warmth to trickle in for a lot of these eastern and central areas. So that is definitely something that I'm tracking here. We do see a cooler period here from the 5th through the 10th of October, so perhaps a colder start to that month as well, 10th through the 15th. And then the 15th through the 20th even. As you know, we'll be a month and a half ahead here by October 15th to 20th time frame. And that is going to be a whole different ball game. Average temperatures in mid-October are going to be colder than our below average temperatures are in early September. So when you factor in the below normal temperatures for mid-October, we're talking about 20 degrees colder than what we're talking about now. So a big time swing. And again, the further into this map that we go, the more it means as far as the actual temperature outside. So definitely still leaning towards a cooler fall here on a lot of this model guidance. With a warm up here coming after the 10th time frame, but overall, the 1st through the 10th is going to look significantly below normal. Here is the 7-day graphical tropical weather outlook. As I mentioned, it's 5 areas of interest, all code yellow though. We do see a 10% chance of development both through the next 48 hours and through the next 7 days here for this Gulf threat. I think that this one does have some chance. Here is your area that we've been tracking down to a 20, falling from grace from that 50% chance we once had. But I did mention the whole time along that if it stuck near the Central America area or South America, that it would struggle big time. And look at this. It's very close to Central America, likely having land interaction. It's going to go straight over the Yucatan Peninsula into the Southern Gulf. That is just not a good setup for tropical development. Now, this one off the East Coast, this initial one, this is that first low, by the way, not this second one, has a 30% chance of development over the next 48 hours and a 30% chance over the next 7 days. This is our highest chance currently, actually, believe it or not. Already north of Bermuda, kind of north of the Outer Banks almost currently. We do see this area here moving towards the Caribbean. There's a 0% chance over the next 48 hours and a 10% chance over the next 7 days. Definitely something to watch, as this would be headed towards perhaps the United States. So an interesting one there. And then the middle of our MDR here, which stands for Main Development Region, in between the Caribbean and Africa, we do have a 0% chance over the next 48 hours, but a 20% chance over the next 7 days. And then we have some very promising waves over Africa that are moving into the MDR. Definitely something that we're going to be watching very closely. Hopefully we just see those fizzle out, but they are looking extreme. We're seeing heavy rainfall in areas of Africa that typically don't see very much at all. We're seeing flooding rainfall actually in the deserts of Africa from some of these very intense tropical waves. So maybe that's the push that's going to move this season into a very active period, as these very, very strong and promising waves off of Africa, because really we haven't seen any of those. We've seen these very mild waves, and maybe the season just isn't favorable enough to carry that type of potential. But if we start to see these stronger waves, we'll have to see how that interacts with our record-breaking favorable conditions in the Atlantic. Definitely going to be interesting and something that we're going to be tracking, but anything over Africa is usually about 2 weeks away. So we're talking long range here at this point. Definitely something to pay attention to, but nothing to worry about imminently. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Be sure to check out Prestige Weather again underneath this video. Be sure to subscribe. We do upload every single day. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload, so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.